Is there really a generational divide, or is it poor leadership and poor followership?
You know, I would have firmly said yes, there is a generational divide. A few years ago, before I started my consulting company, and getting around the country, you know, whether it's Iowa, Chicago, Boston, you know, wherever I've been, Pacific Northwest, all over. And what I think, the funny way, read the question one more time. This is a great point.
Is there a generational divide, or is it poor leadership and poor followership?
So what generation you think wrote that question, right? My guess is a millennial wrote the question, right? Because they're super frustrated. They're upset with their managers because the managers are like, you're whiny, you're always asking questions, just, you know, listen to me. And then I think the managers in the fire service are like, man, they're always asking questions, they don't read. And, you know, Ray McCormick made a great statement when I was teaching somewhere with him, where I was attending one of his classes. He's one of my mentors, you know. I think he's on a different level. And he was talking about working in Harlem. He was saying how much he loved smartphones. And I got a smartphone late. I got a smartphone like 3 or 4 years ago, because I was like, I got a cell phone only like 2 years before that. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're totally annoying. You know, there's no textbooks, there's no highlighters, there's no paper, there's no graphs, you know, there's no this. And he's like, well, you know, I noticed in Harlem, fires went down and graffiti went down and trash on the street went down. You know, everybody's on their smartphones, blah, blah, learning stuff. And I go, you know, I don't quite remember how he worded it, but he's like, you have to understand, when you go into a firehouse and there's 8 or 9 people with their smartphones out and they're looking at YouTube videos of fires and stuff, that's their fire officer's handbook of tactics. You know, they're looking at this and that, and he's like, if you don't manage that, you know, if you don't properly do that. So I think it's a communications issue. You know, I think that those people are just as excited as the movers and shakers and people who are into the job, except they didn't have to go down to the library. You know, every major city I go to, I still go to the library and I say, how many fire books are here? Like, I've done it in Chicago, I've done it in New York. If I'm out hired as a consultant, I'm going to your library and I'm looking, and I've found books that are out of print. And Kurt Isaacson talks about gallons per second a lot, and boy, it's mentioned in 30 seconds. I mean, it's mentioned in books from the 30s. And it's like, did Kurt term that, and did he read the book and then steal that term? No, we're all looking at the same problem, and he came up with that thought originally. And I had that experience as well. Like, I changed the hydraulics equation. I was positive that it was a new thought, and I read a book from the 70s by a guy named Pergington. It was an engineer, and he had come up with the same equation I came up for new hose. So I think this is just a big misunderstanding in communication, and I think that's one of the skills in the fire service that is super poorly done. But the caveat to that, not to beat up on our industry too much, I think communication is super poorly done nationally. And a perfect example is our current presidential elections. You know, they've divided us, or we've self-divided on a bunch of fringe issues, and essentially we all want to be better. And I think the millennial baby boomer divide or Gen X divide, I'm lucky I'm not independent Gen X, so I can say, well, I'm in neither party, but that's because we're, you know, if the old Gen X complaint is that we're apathetic and we didn't do anything as a generation. And it's probably somewhat true as a generalization, but to me, it's just communication, because these people want to learn. They're super interested, and if you just think, oh, it's why I don't want to answer that question, you're being a bad manager. But if you can't see it from the other side as a millennial, it's like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't knock on his door at 8 o'clock when he's doing a bunch of paperwork because we had a 20-run day. This might not be an appropriate time. So I think just in life, communication is one of those skills, and understanding is super hard. And I think this is a ridiculous argument, but a super good question.
So In my experience, especially in our station, we kind of have me, who's obviously a really young guy, and then my driver, who's been there for 18 years, and he's almost more energetic than I am, and I can't keep up with him. So I think in a case of that question, where is there a generational divide, I think there is, because he knows things that I haven't seen, and he's done things I haven't done, and it's a positive generational divide. And I think a department's culture can let that generational divide be a negative thing, as Dennis was saying, if they don't realize how those different generations communicate. If you have a training, for example, a training division who doesn't know how to answer me, I'm very much a generation of a why do we do this? Why are we taking this many steps to do this? And if that training division is more of a, well, it's because that's the way we do it, it's going to be hard to get buy-in from me. So I think if we, figure out, depending on what end of the generation we are in, if we're under the, millennial or Generation X, whatever, if we figure out how to navigate through those different conversations and those communication cues and use some of those generational divides as more of a positive thing, I don't think it comes down always to poor leadership or poor management, but like simply just understanding who they are and where they came from. But in my experience, the generational divide has been a positive thing for me because I'm able to learn a different avenue and a different aspect of the job through a different set of eyes. And they're also able to learn from me, especially being someone who's a little younger. But I do know that generational divide can also hinder things. So I think it's probably could be a never-ending problem with a not real concrete solution, or it cannot be a problem. So it's kind of a tougher one to answer, but that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I think Dennis is onto something, because I actually wrote that question 41, 42 years ago, and this person independently discovered that. I wondered the same thing. I wasn't like the other children. I was asking why back then, and that was not really an acceptable thing, either for my captain or my instructors in Proby school. I think if we asked that question, or if we looked at that question at 10-year intervals, at least back to the 70s and probably back to the 30s when my dad came on the job, every cycle, whether it be a 10 or 15 years cycle, we would find that the old guys were saying the same thing about the new guys, and the new guys were saying the same thing about the old guys. So I think that we have generational differences. My dad grew up during the Depression. That framed his entire view of the world. He served in the military in World War II. That framed his entire view of the world. I didn't have that experience, so he and I looked at things very, very differently. And I think we have the same thing today, except maybe the pace of this is changing, and maybe before it was 15-year difference or 20-year difference, and now it's 5 years or 6 years difference, because things are changing very quickly. And I think it really does come down to the issue of communication and the ability to walk around and kind of look at things from the other person's perspective. So I think some of it is kind of the inherent differences between generations, and I think the other part of it is probably differences in leadership and followership. One of the examples that I've used in our organization is when we look at the hierarchy in the fire service. If the fire chief asks a couple of new members, could you do this? That's sort of a polite way of saying do it, but it's perceived very differently. I mean, when I was a brand new firefighter, if the captain or the chief said, could you wash the car, or could you wash the rig, or whatever it might be, that was an order. That was my perception. Where today it could be, yeah, if I have time. And if we don't understand that difference in the use of the language, that could be a problem. Somebody's going to be disappointed. So I think that a lot of it does have to do with our leadership skill, our leadership ability, or ability to understand that not everybody's the same and everybody's bringing something different to the party, and how do we work with that?
The boomers said it about the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers are saying it about the millennials, right? There's no difference. History repeats itself. If you want to find out really how you're going to adapt and bridge this gap between the Xers and the millennials, ask the millennials. And I sincerely mean that. They will tell you straight up how they're driven, what motivates them, what doesn't, and what they expect from you. Bottom line. So if you're struggling with adapting, ask them. They'll be more than willing to tell you. You know, part of our challenge right now in our industry is we're shunning their inability. And the inability is based off of perception and what was important to you based off what generation you come from. You know, we had to adapt our program with our probationary firefighters. Tire pressure gauge, what's that? I stop at a store, they get out a tire pressure gauge, they check the pressure for me. I go to the Les Schwab on the corner, that's who does my tire pressure. We had to put that in as part of our probationary training program. A dipstick to check the oil and the transmission level. Guess what? A lot of the millennials, they don't use those. They go somewhere and they actually get that taken care of for them. That's not a negative. That means we need to change. We need to adapt. It happened again from it's been a very blue-collar industry, and that's all changing. The motivation, the drive is differently than us, the Gen Xers. So adapt it. It's actually, I think, in our industry, it's making it better. We just need to know how to manage it.
Wow. All right, so this was actually a pretty mellow talk, so I figure I'll be the black sheep that just starts it and be that guy. So when I started in the fire service 26 years ago, as a 19-year-old know-it-all punk, somebody said to me, "Kid, the fire service doesn't change for you, you change for the fire service." And I kind of smiled and went, "What do you know?" And I went on my way and learned through the school of hard knocks. I agree with what everyone's saying. I agree with what the literature is out there, and I agree with your saying about people going to an oil change place to get their oil checked. We, though, can never lose sight as a fire service that someone still needs to check the oil in the pump or at the start of every shift. So is it incumbent upon us to take that kid and say, "All right, I'm going to show you," you're 25, 26 years old, "and I'm going to show you for the first time how to check the oil in a motor." But we have to do that, and then we have to let them know we have this checklist for a reason. It's here because people have blown motors up in $500,000 fire trucks because they let the oil go dry. So I guess what I'm saying is we have to find a balance of how we train people, of how we learn their learning styles, but we can never lose sight of the fact that they still need to be proficient, they still need to understand that we're a paramilitary service, and we're like that for a reason. They still need to understand rigs need to get checked, duties need to get done, and we still ultimately have a job to do. And so finding that balance is difficult, and I think these folks said things more articulately than I can say about how we find that balance, but ultimately never lose the sight of the fact that someone still needs to check the oil on the pumper.
Yeah, in agreement. I think there is a generational difference, but so what? The one thing we can come together at is being good at your job. That transcends the generations. I liked, what was the old Secretary of Defense with all the good one-liners? His was, "You go to war with the army you have." Because we go to war with the fire department we have, and we all better figure out how to make that work, because who we hire has really been taken out of our hands. We're going to get what we get, and we have to make that work. And being good at your job is the thing that transcends it. How you get there is, to me, where you kind of make some concessions. So when I was training a recruit class a few years ago, I realized that they didn't learn the same way that I did, and frankly, shame doesn't work. It worked with me great, but it didn't work with them, and that was a good learning moment for me. But I'm in agreement, I just heard this the other day from someone, for the younger members coming up, I'm here to help you, but remember, you didn't choose us, we chose you. And so you got to come along too. It's where we meet together to make this happen. And again, it's when, what are we here for? That's ultimately it. So
I was waiting to see hear how Chief Harton would answer this question, because we both work together in the training department. where I am now. And we've had this generational gap come through. We've tried to train them in the ways that would match their generation. And for us, it was movies. You'd make a reference to a movie that they had never seen, or you'd make a reference to a movie that we were eye to eye on and they hadn't seen it. So we started incorporating a list of movies that, in their homework, Top Gun, Emergency, Mother Jugs and Speed, movies that were absolutely necessary for your basic education as a fire and EMS provider. And I think that was when I noticed that there was a generational divide. I don't think it's them not wanting to be followers, us not being good leaders. I think to be a good leader, you need to recognize you have the different people in your crews and find a way to translate what this person is saying to what this person needs to hear.
All right, that is a great answer to that. I just want to thank all of the discussion panel members. I think we could do this for another several hours, but we have to move on, so thank you very much.
When we designed the MSA G1 SCBA, we worked closely with firefighters to create an SCBA that met your needs. The result is the all-new G1 SCBA that provides increased safety and situational awareness for each and every firefighter. We heard you say that loud and clear communications are vital on the fire ground. That's why we made electronic voice amplification standard on every G1, giving every firefighter the ability to give and receive clear direction at critical times. You stressed the importance of situational awareness and visibility, so we took a multi-level approach. We covered the shoulder and cylinder straps with an enhanced retroreflective material that can take the heat. We kept the glow-in-the-dark band around the cylinder for good measure. But most importantly, we took a hard look at the buddy lights. There are 7 of them, providing 360-degree visibility, and even air status information to those around you. You told us to make it easy to get the information you need, and we did. The G1 features a full-color electronic display, but also a brightly lit pneumatic gauge. The full-color display can be configured in a number of ways to fit your SOP and make the information you need easy to get. Finally, you told us to include rescue options for those instances where seconds matter. We did that too. When your air is low, you will hear this alarm. And the patent-pending RIT light will illuminate the universal air connection, providing you with extra visibility when it's needed most. Our patented universal air connection lets you donate air from your SCBA to your buddies, so you don't need to stay tethered while evacuating. Finally, the G1 has been designed with buddy breathing and a remote quick fill system for additional rescue breathing options. The G1 SCBA from MSA Safety is created with your safety in mind. Because when you go in, we go in with you. Contact your local sales manager to learn more.